Why walk into a supermarket for fruit at all, when the best fruit you'll ever taste could be growing right outside your door? If you think cherries, figs, and blueberries need a big backyard and endless patience, think again. Whether you've got a small balcony, a tight patio, or a narrow strip by your front or back steps, you already have everything you need. One container and the right dwarf variety turns that space into a backyard orchard that feeds you for years, even if you're short on time or new to growing. Today, I'll reveal 7 high-yield dwarf fruit trees for container gardening. Set plants. 7 generous harvests. The same fruit you remember from childhood, growing on your patio or balcony, and stay until the very end. Because the final tree hides a secret so strange, it's pollinated by a single insect that crawls inside the fruit itself. But first, do me one quick favor. Drop your USDA growing zone in the comments right now. A couple of these trees actually need a cold winter to fruit at all, and I'll tell you exactly which ones as we go. Zone 4, 6, 8. Wherever you are, put it below, and I'll help you pick the right trees. I read every single one. Kicking off our backyard container orchard at number 7 is the Dwarf Pomegranate. A fresh pomegranate runs $2 to $3 at the store, and most are shipped from across the world, picked underripe. Grow your own, and this ancient shrub gives you hundreds of jewel-filled crimson fruits, small enough for a pot, because pomegranate naturally thrives in rocky, barren ground. You'll want a heavy, unglazed, 5-gallon terracotta pot, which pulls excess moisture away from the roots. Fill it with a sharp, alkaline, desert-style cactus mix loaded with crushed gravel and pumice. You can grow it from a hardwood cutting, or even the seeds inside the fruit. Those seed-grown plants take about 3 years to bear. Place it in the most punishing full sun you have, and feed it a single handful of bone meal in early spring. By late autumn, the small leathery red orbs start to split open on the branch. Now here is the desert trap. This plant is a desert survivor, and it wants to be treated like one. Water it on a steady schedule, and the constantly damp roots will rot. Instead, let it dry out completely, almost until the leaves droop. Then give it one deep, soaking drink. In the kitchen, crack open the rind, scoop out the ruby arils, and crush them for antioxidant-rich juice. And the good news on cold. It's hardy to zone 8, and in colder regions, you just move the dormant pot into an unheated garage for winter. Now, here's a story most people have never heard, backed by a clinical trial in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Those arils are loaded with punicalagins, antioxidants shown to reverse arterial plaque and lower blood pressure. But the pomegranate's real legend is far older. In ancient Greek myth, it was the fruit of the dead. Persephone ate 6 pomegranate seeds in the underworld and was cursed to spend 6 months there every year. And that is the myth the Greeks used to explain the coming of winter itself. Number 6. The Dwarf Thornless Blackberry. A small carton costs $4 or $5 at the store, and half are fuzzy with mold within days. Traditional blackberry brambles are thorn-covered monsters that take over a whole backyard. But this dwarf variety stays compact, thornless, and still gives you a heavy harvest, because it grows as a dense, low bush rather than a sprawling cane. A wide 5-gallon heavy plastic pot is the perfect home. Fill it with a slightly acidic, airy soil mixed with peat moss and rich compost. Plant a bare root dormant plant deeply in early spring, in 8 hours of full sun. Feed it once a month. And by midsummer, the bush hangs heavy with plump, jet black berries. And with 0 thorns, you pick them barehanded without losing a drop of blood. Now here is the thirsty trap. Blackberries drink hard when they're fruiting. Let it dry out in the peak summer heat, even briefly, and the berries shrivel up small and seedy before they ripen. So water deeply and often, and keep that soil consistently moist. In the kitchen, these sweet berries are the heart of dark jams and rich cobblers. And it's tough on cold. Down to zone 4, overwintering easily in an unheated garage, dormant until spring. Now, here's a fact that surprises almost everyone, confirmed by the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry. The dark pigment holds anthocyanins that cross the blood-brain barrier, helping reverse age-related decline. But here's the strangest part. A blackberry isn't actually a true berry at all. It's what botanists call an aggregate fruit, meaning every juicy bump on its surface is a tiny, complete fruit of its own, each with its own seed. This next berry is famously hard to grow in the ground, but ridiculously easy in a pot. Number 5. The Dwarf Blueberry. A small carton runs $3 or $4, shipped across the country, days past their prime. Blueberries fail in garden dirt for one reason. They demand extremely acidic soil most gardens just don't have. A container is the ultimate cheat code because you control the soil completely. Because the roots are fine and prone to suffocation, you'll want a 5-gallon fabric grow bag. The soil is non-negotiable. An acidic mix of peat moss and pine bark fines at a pH between 4 and 5. Plant a 2-year-old bare root bush in full sun and feed it twice a season with an azalea fertilizer. By midsummer, it's covered in white flowers that swell into plump, dusty blueberries. Now here is the tap water trap. You water every day in summer, but it has to be rainwater. The alkaline calcium in tap water slowly destroys the soil's acidity, and the bush dies a quiet death. Collect rainwater, and it thrives for years. In the kitchen, these sweet tart berries are perfect for muffins or morning oatmeal. Now, here's what surprises people most. This bush actually needs a cold winter to fruit. Without a real chilling period, it won't set berries the next year, so it stays outdoors, dormant, never in a warm room indoors. And the history runs deep. Confirmed by a long-term Harvard School of Public Health study, the anthocyanins that make them blue are shown to delay cognitive decline and protect against Alzheimer's. Here's the fascinating part. The blueberry is one of the only major food crops on Earth truly native to North America. Indigenous tribes guarded their wild patches fiercely, using the crushed berries to dye sacred garments. And staying on that theme of trees that love the cold, the next is just as happy in a freezing winter. Number 4. The dwarf bush cherry. Fresh cherries are some of the most expensive fruit in the store, often $6 or $7 a pound, and only for a few weeks a year. Forget those towering cherry trees that take a decade to fruit. Modern breeding has produced shrub-like dwarf cherries that yield incredible amounts in a pot. Because the root system is shallow and fibrous, a wide 7-gallon fabric grow bag gives maximum oxygen. Fill it with a slightly acidic, composted soil mixed with coarse sand for drainage. Apply a slow-release organic fertilizer just once in early spring. And best of all, these bushes max out at 4 feet, so you can drape them in netting and pick crimson cherries from a patio chair. Now, here is the fruit drop trap. As the blossoms drop and green fruit sets, the soil has to stay deeply moist. Let it dry out at that exact moment, even once. And the panicked plant aborts every last cherry before it ripens. In the kitchen, these tart cherries are the kings of baking, making the deepest red pies you'll ever taste. And the cold is remarkable. Hardy down to zone 2, it doesn't just survive a brutal winter. It depends on that cold to fruit. Now, here's a fact from a study in the Journal of Nutrition. Tart cherries contain extraordinarily high levels of natural melatonin, the compound that regulates sleep, making them one of the few foods proven to improve it. But here's the real gift. For a small space, unlike almost every sweet cherry, which needs a second tree nearby to pollinate, these dwarf bush cherries are 100% self-fruitful. One plant gives you a full harvest. If these first 4 trees just showed you how much real fruit one container can produce, take 1 second and subscribe. Every week, I show you exactly how to grow real food in containers, even in the smallest, coldest spaces. It's free, and the last 3 trees on this list might be the most rewarding of all. Now, this next fruit is one you'll almost never find in a store at any price. Number 3, the dwarf Everbearing mulberry. Most people avoid mulberries because standard trees grow 40 feet tall, with roots that crack concrete foundations. But this dwarf mutation is a container superstar. handing you buckets of sweet blackberry-like fruit. Because the roots are so vigorous, you'll want a large 15-gallon fabric grow bag. Fill it with a rich, loamy, compost-heavy soil. Start it from a dormant bare root cutting, buried halfway in early spring, in full blazing sun. Mulberries drink hard when fruiting, so water deeply every day in summer to keep the berries plump, not dry. And unlike standard trees that fruit once a year, this one produces wave after wave from late spring to first frost. Now, here is the root-bound trap. Plant a dwarf mulberry in a solid plastic pot, and the roots circle, choke themselves, and the tree loses its dwarf size and vigor. The breathable fabric bag is the secret. It forces the roots to air prune at the edge, keeping the tree small and productive. In the kitchen, eat them raw by the handful, bake them into pies, or boil them into a thick jam. And it's good down to zone 7, overwintering dormant in an unheated garage. Now, here's a fact from the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry. Dark mulberries are loaded with resveratrol, the same heart-protecting antioxidant found in red wine. But here's the part almost nobody knows. The leaves of the mulberry are the one and only food of the silkworm. Without this single tree, the global silk industry would collapse. The silkworm starves before it eats anything else. Now, here's a fruit nobody believes you can grow in a pot. And it's our runner-up. Number 2, the genetic dwarf nectarine. A ripe nectarine costs $3 or $4 a pound, and most are picked rock hard, never ripening right. This isn't a normal tree grafted onto small roots. It's a true genetic dwarf, a miniature tree topping out at 5 feet, producing full-size stone fruit. Because it gets loaded with heavy fruit, you'll want a substantial 15-gallon plastic pot. Fill it with well-draining soil, amended with compost and sand, and plant a bare root dormant tree deeply before spring. Set it in the sunniest spot you have, and feed it a slow-release fruit tree fertilizer in early spring. Keep the watering deep and steady at fruit set, because if the soil dries out even once, the tree drops all its nectarines. By late summer, the skin blushes deep red, and the flesh yields to a gentle thumb. Now here is the top-heavy trap. A 5-foot tree carrying a full load of stone fruit becomes dangerously top-heavy. Plant it in a light pot, and one summer storm tips the whole thing over. That heavy 15-gallon pot is the ballast that keeps the tree upright. In the kitchen, slice these warm sun-ripened nectarines over vanilla ice cream. And it's hardy to about zone 6, overwintering dormant in a garage. Just protect the early blossoms from a late frost. Now, here's a fact from the University of California, Davis. These dwarf trees have extremely short internodes, so the dense canopy shades the fruit from sunburn. But here's the strangest part. A nectarine and a peach are the exact same species. The only difference is a single recessive gene, the one that controls fuzzy peach skin. And that brings us to number 1, the tree this whole list has been building toward, the dwarf fig, the legendary Little Miss Figgy. Fresh figs are some of the most expensive fruit in any store, so delicate they bruise in a day, which is why most people only see them dried. Standard fig trees grow 30 feet tall, with invasive roots that crush concrete pipes. But this dwarf mutation hands you sweet, gourmet figs from a tiny patio pot. Here's the strange secret. Fig roots need to be cramped to fruit heavily, so you'll want a tight 5-gallon terracotta pot, which forces the tree to stop growing roots and start producing fruit. Fill it with a poor, heavy soil mixed with sand. Start it from a hardwood cutting and place it in the most blistering, sun-scorched corner you have. Feed it just a single handful of bone meal in spring. By late summer, the figs droop, soft and heavy, often leaking a drop of honey from the bottom. Now, here is the splitting trap. The roots want it dry, and so does the watering can. Overwater as the figs are swelling, and they split wide open and rot on the branch. Let the soil dry out completely between deep soakings, and the fruit stays perfect. In the kitchen, wrap these warm figs in prosciutto and roast them for a luxury appetizer. And it's hardy to zone 7, overwintering dormant in a cool garage or basement. Now, for the fascinating fact I promised you at the very beginning, confirmed by the University of California, a fig is not really a fruit, with flowers on the outside. Its flowers grow entirely inside, sealed within the fruit itself. To pollinate them, a single tiny female wasp crawls in through a microscopic hole, lays her eggs, dies inside, and is completely dissolved by the ripening fig. So there they are, 7 dwarf fruit trees, each one thriving in a single container. Not one of them needs a big backyard. Not one of them needs years of waiting for a first harvest. Pomegranate, the desert jewel, tied to the ancient myth of winter itself. Blackberry, the thornless bush you harvest without losing a drop of blood. Blueberry, the all-American berry that fights for your memory. Bush cherry, the 4-foot tree that fruits all on its own. Mulberry, the berry no store can sell you, feeding silkworms for centuries. Nectarine, a peach and a nectarine, separated by a single gene, and the dwarf fig, with its flowers hidden inside, pollinated by one tiny wasp. These are the same fruits your grandparents grew, the ones you remember from childhood. And here's the best part. Some of them only fruit because winter does its job. A small balcony, the right pot. And for the cold-loving ones, a freezing winter working in your favor. That's the whole secret. And no, before you ask, these are not GMO. Every tree on this list is either a natural dwarf variety or grafted onto dwarfing rootstock, and you'll find them at any certified nursery or reputable online grower. So tell me, down in the comments, which of these 7 are you planting first? And which fascinating fact surprised you the most? I read every single one. And if this brought back the fruit you grew up with, share it with someone who still believes you need a big backyard to grow your own. They need to see this.